Greetings. Welcome to chapter 2 of the third treatise. And this chapter is titled The Purpose of Representation. So this entire treatise is here to help us see more clearly the idea of who we present in the world. And just a reminder to you that the one that you present to the world is your representation. It's not who you are, but it's representing who you are in the world. And that's what we're going to work with in this treatise. Verse 1 tells us, what purpose would it seem to serve to have anything exist only as a representation? It's a good question. We might think of this in terms of original purpose, and the original purpose of representation being to share the self in a new way. All right, so there we have it. He tells us right out of the gate. The original purpose of representation is to share the self in a new way. And then he compares it to art, which is why I chose this image, because this is kind of an artistic image of a self. Art is like that. The artist desires to share the self in a new way through the representation of their experience. So they're not trying to make an exact replica of what you see. That would be a photograph. What the artist is trying to do is to first expand their own experience by creating a representation, helps them to understand what they're experiencing better and to experience it on a deeper level. And secondly, there's a communication then that happens with the person who is watching or hearing the art, and that is the way that it's received. So there's a communication that goes both within and without that brings the art is then this representation brings everybody to a new level of knowing. And like art, something new is created through this new expression, just like the painting is new or the piece of music is new. The expression of yourself is new. It didn't exist before you came here. And its purpose is to expand your awareness of yourself and who you are and what your experience is, and to make something known. So, and to communicate that, to share that, so that someone else might witness what it is that you are and what you're representing. So just to reiterate that in case you didn't get it, this is the same purpose as relationship. To expand awareness and make something known. Verse 3 tells us, and I apologize that this slide is so text heavy, but we just needed to have a lot of the real quote. The choice to represent yourself in form was a choice for separation, but not because separation itself was desired, as you have assumed. This is like we all thought we wanted to be separate from God. No, that's not why we picked it. Once this assumption was accepted, the duality of your existence became paramount, became the only means you saw of deciphering the world around you and your role within it. Separation, aloneness, independence, individuality, these became the purpose you assumed rather than the purpose you set out to achieve, that of a new way of expression in a form that would expand awareness through relationship of self and others. So that's where the mistake actually happened, was that you assumed you wanted to be separate from God. That's why you separated. So what's being corrected now is that reasoning. No, that's not why we separated, why we individualized. We did it for expression and awareness. You thought you chose separation out of defiance or desire to be away from God. Verse 5, this could not be further from the truth. and is the cause of all your suffering. For contained within this belief was the belief that with each successful step toward independence came a corresponding step away from God. I mean, part and parcel with that belief is the fact that if I want to be independent and I want to experience what it's like to be separate, I can't be connected to God. It's like the farther I get into this experience, the more I leave God out of the picture. That's a mistake. You have tried to both glorify the self for achieving independence. Yeah, we can relate to that. Like, yeah, I can do that. I'm capable. I've learned how to do this life on some level better than I could before anyway. And punish the self for turning away from God. It's like, oh, why do I do it that way? That's so stupid. Once you realize that you came here for the purpose of expanding awareness, you're left blameless. You really came to see what it was like. You came to see what your experience would be in this particular dimension. You're not at fault. You're not to blame. You didn't do anything wrong. But in order to keep you from suffering, like this poor little boy in this picture, we need to correct your idea of feeling like you're bad or you're wrong. So he tells us not all representations are art, and not all that you call the self is self. Okay? So there's something here. Not everything that you think is a representation of you is a representation. No, no, no. In art, there is no right or wrong, but only accurate or inaccurate representations of truth. So if I decide I'm going to paint an elephant and I do the painting according to my memory or what I think an elephant looks like or whatever, and I'm not really giving it my experience of an elephant. If I paint my experience of an elephant, now we've got art. But if I just paint what I think would be a good representation of an elephant, that's not art. So it's an accurate or an inaccurate representation of truth. Inaccurate representations have no meaning. It's not going to hurt anybody if I paint a bad picture of an elephant. They don't change the truth, but they leave yourself unaltered. So anything that you have put into your representation in the world, into your persona, into the character you're playing, you haven't harmed anything, even if it wasn't accurate. There's no harm done. It's okay. Verse 10, thus you stand at the beginning, with a self now devoid of the meaninglessness you but attempted to assign it. You stand in the transformational moment between the unreal and the real. All you await is an idea, a remembrance of the original idea about your personal self. And where do you find this original idea? Well, he tells us the memory lies in your heart. You know who you really are. You touch it. And when you touch it, all the bells and whistles go off. You know it. Realize that you abandoned yourself and God, but you didn't need to. You're not a rebellious child who ran away from home. No harm has been done. It's all cool. And then in verse 13, he gives us just a little bit of warning here. While you may be happily congratulating yourself on leaving such adolescent thinking behind, this thinking must be quickly replaced with a new idea about yourself, or its hold on you will remain. And of course, this is because we've created all these pathways for our identity. We see ourselves in certain ways, and the representation that we've been presenting to the world has become so familiar to us. It's our default system. So He's saying we need to move ahead now that you see clearly that you probably haven't been representing yourself properly in the world and to yourself. And now now that you've seen that, we quickly need to replace that, because otherwise you're going to slip back into that old way of thinking who you were, thinking that is actually a representation of who you are. So that's the end of this short chapter, and we'll follow it up very shortly with chapter 3. Hope I'll see you then.